Atlanta police arrested 3 people on Wednesday who helped organize a bail fund supporting anti-police protesters and activists aiming to halt construction of a law enforcement training center that has been dubbed Cop City. Now, Georgia State and Atlanta police raided the home of one of the organizers of the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, the bail fund in question, as part of ongoing efforts to crack down on the anti-Cop City movement. The Bureau confirmed it took in Marlon Scott Couts, Savannah D. Peterson, and Adele McClain on charges of money laundering and charity fraud. Atlanta activists warned that the arrests are a gross overreach, promptly calling for civil liberties groups to look into the authorities' latest step to crush the Cop City protesters. Now, according to The Intercept, to date, 42 people are facing charges of state domestic terrorism in connection with the Stop Cop City movement.
This is an incredible instance of authoritarian outreach. We rolled the video a little while ago. I'm sure we'll show it again. A SWAT team was sent in to investigate and arrest 3 activists. These are people, I think some of them are lawyers who were arranging for a bail fund of protesters who have been arrested and themselves charged with domestic terrorism charges. This is an incredible escalation of making it illegal to protest in the United States of America. Remember, let's just back this up a little bit. They're building this facility known as Cop City, which has absolutely no local buy-in from anybody in the community. They keep holding these town halls where people can call in and come in to speak and comment. They had 7 hours of hearings with 0 people talking in defense of it. They wrapped it and immediately said, okay, we're going ahead forward with the project. It's expensive and it's an environmental nightmare, which has led to a number of people to be there, occupy the forest, and try to prevent the construction from happening. In the context of that, the police shot a protester 40-odd times, I believe it was, and killed him. They were alleging that he shot first and that they had to shoot him in self-defense. Subsequent autopsy reports determined that that was not the case, that this was another police murder, which is exactly why people are protesting this kind of facility
in the first place. Right?
In the first place, yes, this kind of authoritarian overreach by the police. And now they are criminalizing activists for creating a bail fund to bail out the people that they have charged with domestic terrorism because they're exercising their First Amendment rights, including people who are arrested and being charged in this way for simply distributing pamphlets and mailboxes, raising awareness about what's going on in Cop City.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely terrible and absolute violation of First Amendment rights to engage in protest, to distribute information. SWAT teams are notoriously bad civil liberties organizations. I've said it's not a matter of, from my perspective, of like overall funding levels for police. It's like, what is being funded? Are we funding? Are we funding detectives so they can clear more murder investigations and check more rape kits and respond to calls of actual like domestic violence or something to patrol the streets in places where there are violence? Or are we giving cops expensive new toys to break down your door in the middle of the night and arrest you for something? That's not the police shouldn't be like a domestic military. In fact, I've heard people argue that many of our military service members get better training and can be more respectful in foreign countries of other populations than in some places our own police are, the way that they treat us.
Yes.
Now, that's not saying training for police obviously is important. So I support reallocating fund. I never want to give a government program more funding overall, but I would reallocate more funding to training. But so the opposition to the Cop City thing specifically is because it is a training facility, but they're environmental. Can you tell me more about what the opposition is here? Because training police to be more respective of our rights would be a good thing.
Right. Well, hypothetically, sure. But the center is, one, expected to cost $90 million. It's expected to take up over 85 acres of, valuable, forest land that has environmental value. It will include a mock city for burn building training and urban police training. So basically, some of the same kind of SWAT activities that we're watching here, how to control streets, how to move in a military style, emergency vehicle operating course for emergency vehicle drivers, exactly the kinds of interventions that we're watching in that tape are what this facility is intended to facilitate. Now, the other side is saying that it will boost morale, retention, and recruitment. for our public safety personnel. Well, if you're not even articulating as part of your argument that it's going to make the population safer, this is for morale boosting for police officers, and you're spending $90 million on it and raising 85 acres of valuable forest and parkland in Atlanta. What are we even doing here? Moreover, at this point, I misspoke. They actually shot this protester 57 times, Manuel Tortuga Esteban Paez Terán. Killed him dead, and the autopsy report showed that he had no gunpowder residue on his hands, which is an indicator that he had not actually fired a gun. There were wounds all over his entire body. You would expect that at a certain point, cops are advocating a building of a facility, and in the course of doing so, end up murdering a member of the population they're supposed to be protecting and serving. That would stop this thing in its tracks. It has not done so. And moreover, The Intercept has done some really interesting reporting here. They looked at a more detailed arrest warrant for the SWAT team that enabled the SWAT team to go in and arrest these people for these alleged money laundering charges. It talks about reimbursements from the nonprofit to one of the arrestees' personal PayPal accounts for minor expenses, including gasoline, forest cleanup, tote bags, COVID rapid test, media, yard signs, and other miscellaneous expenses. So even if you think that there's some inappropriate use of funds, which there's no evidence of at this point, to raise bail and to conduct their protest activities, you're sending in SWAT teams because people spent money on COVID tests and pamphlets in the United States of America. Local politicians have been devastatingly silent on this. The free speech movement, broadly speaking, which has members on the left and the right, there's been some criticism of conservatives for not raising this as one of the most significant free speech violations of the year, if not for a longer period of time than that. The routine ratcheting up of criminal penalties for people who are engaged in protests, including a lot of environmental protests, is something everybody should be concerned about. There's an environmental protest that got a 9-year sentence for protesting at an oil pipeline last year. Crickets from the mainstream media about this sort of thing. And I think that what people are realizing is that with growing public unease and a feeling that the government is not responsive to the interests of the people, we're going to see more and more protests. America knows how effective protest movements have been in the past, and they're making sure that anyone who dares to stand up in the face of this kind of authoritarian overreach doesn't see the light of day again, even for passing out pamphlets.
Yeah, again, if you're very active on the free speech category of issues, if you spend a lot of time criticizing people in liberal circles for trying to criminalize misinformation, that kind of thing, you really ought to speak up more often. If you're not speaking up, you should speak up when the police are literally trying to prevent people from circulating pamphlets and protests.
And these people, even if these charges don't stick,
they have the right to protest, even if you don't agree with the protest going on.
Right. And even if these charges don't stick, they now have to hire more lawyers to get them out of this situation. Are they going to be able to raise funds for that kind of a legal defense? And this is the classic state intimidation that especially poor working class protesters don't have the ability to fight back against. We saw people like Kyle Rittenhouse, rightly or wrongly, able to raise $1 million bail fund. Was that something? Was a SWAT team sent to the houses of the people who were raising money for him in his defense and for him to be released? When you see this kind of leveraging of state power, it gives you an indication of what's really a threat to the fundamental system.
I mean, conservatives have have complained about how, like, for instance, the January 6 people have been arrested and SWAT involvement in some of those cases, right? That's what one of the whistleblowers was talking about. But it's important, to be principled about it and not just complain about it when it's only affecting your side, as is sometimes
a man
what's going on.
I think it was just last week, got the longest sentence of anybody charged in 1-6, maybe it was earlier this month or last month, in the 1-6 protest so far. He got 10 years.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah,
that's one of the militia leaders who was charged with organizing it. We did. I think we talked about it on a day you were out.
Okay.
I'm very.
14 years. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because they're charging him with a kind of like conspiracy to organize it.
Right.
And I think to my mind, there is so little evidence that what happened was organized. It was very spontaneous, and I absolutely support charging people who engaged in trespassing and property destruction with those charges. I do not think you should behave the way they behaved. I'm absolutely for charging them, and with what the statute suggested should be, with the recommended sentence. But to lock people up for 10 or 15 years.
These are murder sentence lengths.
Yeah, right. What they organized was a protest.
Right.
98% of what was going on was legitimate First Amendment activity. And in fact, we're getting off this subject, so we don't have to dwell on this much longer. But what has been suggested is that one of the people who was actually compelling and urging the crowd to commit crimes and to go in and do that thing was that Ray Epps character, who has become a mainstream media darling.
Sure, and look, one of them was Donald Trump as well. And it doesn't sit right with me that there are people who are suffering significant penalties for following the lead of the then president of the United States and believing that the election was actually stolen. It does feel like a disproportionate, a poor focus here of where the harm actually lies and where the responsibility lies, and in a way that actually lowers our civil liberty rights across the board and sets precedents that are going to be destructive to one community or another at a certain point going forward. So we're all in this one together. We'll continue to cover this Cop City story, and I'm more Rising for you right after this.